Welcome back for our fourth workshop sprint with Josh Spector on how to create a newsletter that actually provides value. Thank you all for being flexible with your time and being able to come back today. Things happen, so we're just rolling with it. But thank you so much for coming back today. Really appreciate it. So I think we've learned some really valuable and actionable things so far. I'm excited to see what we're going to learn today. We're going to wrap it up with optimization and analysis. So just for future reference, the recording is going to be available in the DM Lab within 24 hours. Links to resources and agenda I'm going to put in the chat. For Q&A, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat and I'll save them until the end, and then Josh will be able to get to them. And if you're able to turn your camera on, great, because we like to see your faces. We understand if you don't want to. So for the last time, I'm going to introduce Josh, who is the creator of the very popular For the Interested newsletter. I'll put a link in the chat for that. He has 25,000 plus readers each week. He reaches those. He's also an audience growth strategist, a writer, and an entrepreneur. So I'm very excited to have Josh with us today. So welcome back, Josh.
Cool. Thank you. Hi, guys. First of all, I am so sorry about needing to reschedule from yesterday. Literally 5 minutes before we were supposed to start, my internet went out because it drizzles in Los Angeles, and apparently Spectrum can't handle that. Anyway, thank you for bearing with me and coming back. I am going to share my screen, and like Cecilia said, today we're going to talk about analyzing your newsletter and sort of how to optimize it. So let me share my screen. So basically today we're going to talk about how to tell if your newsletter is quote unquote working and what to do if it's not. Up to this point, obviously, if you've seen the previous sessions, hopefully I convinced you in the first session why a newsletter will improve your email marketing strategy and what the difference between a newsletter and email marketing is. Then in the second session, we talked about how to choose a topic and a format and create your newsletter. In the third session, we talked all about how to start growing your audience for it. So today is going to be, once you're sort of up and running, how do you figure out if it's working or not, and how do you improve it as you go? And we're really going to sort of talk about two different pieces. First is kind of analyzing the performance of your newsletter. And then the second half will be some specific tips about how you can optimize and improve that performance. So the first thing is, I want to say that, a newsletter is a long game. So it's going to take time, no matter how great your newsletter may be. It is not an overnight success. It's not like sending a sales email where you send one email and you either get sales or you don't. So go into this with some patience and understanding that you're trying to build something here over time. Don't overreact to your initial results. You send it, you get a few unsubscribes, or you send a few issues and it doesn't feel like it's growing. Don't worry about that. It takes time. So, my newsletter has been very successful. I've also sent it every week for like 5.5 years now. Not that it took 5.5 years to succeed, but where it's at 5 years in is certainly a lot different than where it was 5 months in. So be patient. With that in mind, though, you do want to look for steady progress and improvement, both in terms of results and in terms of your own ability and a sense of what you're doing with it. The newsletter you write, 10 issues in is probably going to be a little different than the one you wrote in the first issue. You will iterate and improve as you go, both in terms of the results and the response you get, and also in terms of your own ability to create it. It most likely should get quicker and easier for you to create as you go. So in those first couple issues, if it takes you a bit of time, don't feel overwhelmed and go, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this. Know that as you go, it will get easier and quicker to create. The other thing is, along those lines, I highly recommend that initially you measure quote unquote success based on your output, not your outcome. So what I mean by that is, don't feel like because you're not getting a ton of new subscribers or you're not immediately getting new clients or sales, that doesn't mean that it's not working. Those things are out of your control. What is in your control is, are you publishing it consistently? Are you, you want to set goals that you can, that are 100% in your control. And so one of the ways I recommend doing this, don't be scared by the number 100. I'll explain that in a second, but try what I call the 100x method. And basically what this means is you pick a specific output goal. I'm going to use the number 100, but you could fill that in with whatever you want. So hypothetically, let's say you were like, okay, I'm going to write 100 issues of this thing. And until I get to 100, I'm not even going to judge whether it's successful or not, whether I should quit or not. I'm just going to write 100. And then when I get to 100, I'm going to take a step back and reassess if this is working. And this approach does a lot of different things. The first thing it does is it gets you out of, and by the way, this works for any project, not just newsletter. I highly recommend it. But it gets you out of, you start a newsletter and almost immediately you're trying to decide whether or not you should quit. So with each issue, you're overreacting to, is this working? Is this not working? Am I wasting my time? And so when you set a sort of output goal, you don't have to worry about that, because you're not even gonna think about quitting until you hit that output goal. The second thing it does is it actually, if it ultimately isn't working or isn't a good use of your time, it gives you an out without feeling like a quitter or a failure. So if you set a goal, and forget the 100 number for a second, but if you say, I'm going to write 10 issues, no matter what, I'm not even going to think about whether it's working or not until I finish 10 issues, then you don't have to constantly be trying to assess whether or not you should quit. But also at the end of 10 issues, it allows you to go, you know what, this isn't working. This isn't a good use of my time. I am going to bail on it, without feeling like a failure. You can actually feel like you accomplished it. You said you were going to do 10, you did 10, you did an assessment, it's not working, it's time to move on. So my advice here basically is pick a specific goal, an output goal, and decide that you're just going to hit that output goal, and then you'll assess, once you hit that point, whether or not you want to continue or what's working or if you want to change it. The other thing about this is it doesn't have to be a number of issues. So using the 100 example, yes, it could be 100 issues. It could be, I'm going to work on the newsletter for 100 days. It also could be, I'm going to spend 100 hours on the newsletter. So you can frame the output however you want, but really it's just about picking a specific output, hitting that goal, and then at that point making decisions if you want to change something or not. The next thing to analyze is when you are sort of analyzing the performance of your newsletter, you want to always remember and focus on your main goal. There's a lot of metrics around newsletters, and we'll talk about those in a second. But really, the most important one is the result you wanted in the first place. You started this newsletter ultimately to do something. You didn't start it to get a high open rate or get a lot of clicks. You probably started it to get sales or leads or grow your audience, whatever that main goal was that you started it for. That's ultimately how you're measuring the success of what you're doing. A successful newsletter isn't successful if it's not accomplishing that goal. If your goal was sales and somehow your newsletter is taken off and you've got 1 million readers and they're all opening it and it's amazing, but no one's buying anything, that's not actually successful, right? You always want to measure it against your main goal. And so again, you need to be clear on that when you start. Is your goal ultimately about getting sales or leads or growing your audience or promoting your cause or whatever that may be? That said, there are a lot of other sort of specific newsletter metrics that are worth paying attention to. But it's important when you think about them to understand what they're actually measuring, because they may not be measuring necessarily what you think, or they may not be as important to you depending on what your goals are. So new subscribers obviously is a metric to pay attention to. It shows the growth. If you're doing this in part to grow your audience, that's worth paying attention to. On the flip side, if your newsletter is really about staying in touch and communicating with your existing audience, then new subscribers is less important of a metric, right? Unsubscribes, we talked about retention and how important that is in the last one. You want to pay attention to that, but you also want to keep in mind you are always going to get unsubscribes. Every time you send an issue, you're going to get unsubscribes. Doesn't mean your newsletter is bad, just means it wasn't for those people. This is especially true in the beginning, because most likely you're starting with a list of people who didn't necessarily subscribe to your newsletter because it didn't exist. So who knows how you got their email. Some of those people are going to be like, oh, I bought a product from you, I don't necessarily want this newsletter. So if you initially get, you'll probably initially get some more unsubscribes than you will down the road. Don't overreact to that. Open rate. People a lot of times misinterpret, and in case you don't know, open rate is obviously the percentage of people who open your email when you send it to them. Sometimes people misinterpret that as an assessment of the quality of the newsletter or email that they send. But it's actually really only about the subject. It's about two things. It's about the subject line primarily, and it's about what they've gotten from you in the past, right? If every time they get an email from you, they find it very valuable, they're more likely to open the next one regardless of subject line. If you might write a fantastic newsletter, but if it has a bad subject line, it's not going to get opened. It doesn't mean the newsletter is bad, it means the subject line was bad, and vice versa. You might write a terrible newsletter issue with an amazing subject line and it gets lots of opens. It doesn't mean that the newsletter was good, it means that the subject line was good. So open rate matters, but don't read too much into it, and keep in mind what it's actually measuring. Link clicks. If you're sharing links to your content or other people's content within your newsletter, it's definitely worth paying attention to what people click. One thing that I think is counterintuitive here. Well, first of all, it's important to measure that because it gives you a sense of what people are most interested in, which is valuable. But also, I think sometimes, let's say you sent, well, my newsletter, for example, I share links to 5 articles. I don't care if people click multiple links. I care if they click at least one link that they love. And when I'm actually putting together my newsletter, I have that in mind. So for example, of the 5 links, I might have one that's a blogging tip, and one that's a newsletter tip, and one that's a productivity tip, and one that's a podcast tip, and one that's a YouTube tip, or something like that. If you don't have a podcast, you're not going to click the podcast tip. That doesn't mean it's not good. That's there for the people that have a podcast. I want everyone in my audience to find one thing that they love, not a bunch of stuff that they kind of like. So when I put the link to the podcast tip, that's specifically for the people in my audience who have a podcast who are going to find that super valuable, right? And then, if I have another one to YouTube, that's the people who are using YouTube are going to find that super valuable. So within your audience, especially if you're sharing sort of multiple pieces of content or curating stuff, think about it like that. You want a blend of, stuff that's going to hit sort of different segments of your audience, and you want to mix it up. And again, when you're looking at the link clicks, don't feel bad if the average person is only clicking 1 or 2 links. Like that's fine, right? As long as it's stuff that if they find one thing in your newsletter that they love, they will come back and open it the next time. What content resonates? So resonates doesn't just mean which links are getting the most clicks. It means if people are replying to you, what are they talking about? It means, what do you see people sharing? Oh, when I wrote a newsletter about this, I saw lots of people share it on social media. When I wrote a newsletter about this, I didn't see anybody share it. Oh, this thing I shared last week, I got a bunch of replies from people. Like, you want to look at like what is not triggering people in a bad way, but what is triggering activity and what is resonating, and that can guide you to do more of that stuff. And then monetization, if monetization is a part of what you're doing with the newsletter, either indirectly, clients, leads, that kind of thing, or directly product sales, obviously that's a metric you'd want to pay attention to. Okay, so let's get in a little bit to how to optimize your newsletter. So you've analyzed all those things, you have a sense of how you're doing, what's working, what's not, and now we'll get into some specifics that you can improve. So the first thing is your sign-up page. Obviously, if you want to grow your audience, you're most likely driving people to a sign-up page. And the better your sign-up page, the higher the percentage of people who will subscribe. There's not really any standard. Everybody's different because there's all sorts of variables. But again, you're sort of competing against yourself. So in terms of improvement, you might go, okay, 10% of people who hit this page are subscribing. Then I changed the copy or changed the way I presented it, and it went up to 15%. Oh, that's obviously a step in the right direction, or it went down to 5%, and that's a step in the wrong direction. So think about it more as sort of a game with yourself as opposed to comparing it to how there is no real, I mean, I guess technically there's an industry standard, but there's so many variables. I wouldn't think about it in that way. This can help you if you look at your sign up page and answer and think about these 5 questions. So, number one, does the copy on your sign up page promise a specific value to a specific audience? It's amazing how many newsletter sign up pages are way too generic, or for that matter, don't even mention the value. Sign up to our newsletter. Why? Right? Like, for who? Right? You want to get specific. You also want to play up the benefits and not just the features. This is another really common mistake. Sign up to our newsletter and we'll send you 4 articles a week. That's the features. Sign up to our newsletter and we'll show you how to become a better gardener. That's a benefit. Pitch the result of your newsletter is sharing content, but pitch the result that they get from that content, not the way you deliver the content. Does it include social proof? Testimonials from readers talking about how great it is, references to companies. This newsletter is read by people at X, Y, and Z companies, which makes it, anything that sort of can give you credibility. Is there a link to your newsletter archive or a sample issue? Again, you're trying to remove reasons why people will not sign up. So some people might be like, oh, this is kind of interesting, but I don't know. They don't know what it is. So it can be really helpful to sort of show them, when they see, oh, okay, this is really good. I want to, it's going to push them over the edge to actually sign up. And then the other thing is, are you requesting as little information as possible for someone to subscribe? This is particularly, a lot of businesses in particularly do this wrong. I get that you want as much information about people as you can. You want their names and their address and their phone number and all that stuff. Every extra form or bit of information you ask people for will reduce the number of people who subscribe. It's why in most big newsletters you see they only ask for email address. I think it's okay to ask for. I would make email address the only required field. I also ask for name, but you certainly don't have to, and I make that optional. But in general, keep that in mind. Ask for as little as possible, and you'll get more subscribers. So I wanted to share this is sample sign-up page copy from some successful newsletters, and it's really just it's not their full sign-up page copy, but it's the way that they describe their newsletter. And I think you'll see several of the things that I just referenced here in terms of specific value for specific audience, benefits instead of features, etc. So I'll start with mine because I'm biased. The way I describe mine is, for the interested, is a dose of inspiration and proven strategies from the world's most successful creators to help you produce, promote, and profit from your creations. Very clear value proposition. Pretty clear who it's for, what you're going to get. You'll notice what I don't say is, oh, it's 5 articles a week and it's this. No, it's like, this is the value. This is how it's going to help you. You'll also notice that I'm talking right to people, right? It's going to help you. I'm not talking about the newsletter. It's as if I'm talking to one particular person, right? The Skim, which you may have heard of, a huge newsletter aimed at sort of millennial. Well, now it's, probably reaches a lot more, but initially aimed at sort of millennial women. They describe it as the morning newsletter that millions wake up to. The Daily Skim connects the dots on how the biggest stories affect your life. So again, another example here where they don't just say, oh, we're sharing the news of the day. It's connects the dots on how the biggest stories affect your life. It's personalized, right? It's here's the benefit of getting this news. Rad Reads is a really good newsletter. Every Saturday morning, 19,123 executive entrepreneurs and creatives rethink their relationship with money and ambition with the Rad Reads newsletter. A few things to note here. You'll see that they use the number as social proof, right? We're not just some other newsletter. We have 19,000 people. They tell you exactly who it's for: executives, entrepreneurs, and creatives. They tell you exactly the value you're going to get. It's going to help you rethink your relationship with money and ambition, right? Checking all the boxes. So There's a lot of ways to do this, but to make it really easy for you, I'm giving you a sort of Mad Libs fill in the blank formula. Basically, if you take this first sentence and fill in the blanks: newsletter name, features, thing your target audience wants for your target audience, right? So these are fictional newsletters, but just to sort of show you how this formula could come to life. The Gardening Gang newsletter features tips about how to grow your garden and discounts on gardening tools for home gardeners. The High School Hoops Junkies newsletter features interviews with college and pro basketball coaches for high school players looking to improve their game. Very simple newsletter. If you do nothing but do this, you'll be your sign up page will at least be on the right track. Also, the other thing is this fill in the blank formula forces you to actually be sure that you're creating something that provides value or that people want. Because if you struggle to fill these in, it means that you're not quite sure what your audience wants or how you're providing value to them or who your audience is. So simple, but helpful, hopefully. One note on this, we're going to do questions at the end. If you have a sign up page up anywhere on your site or a form and are brave enough to have some help, at the end, we can pull it up and I will give you some specific suggestions of how to change the copy or improve it. You can just volunteer in the chat now or at the end, and we can do that. Okay, next thing you can optimize is your welcome email. Your welcome email is basically when someone subscribes, you want to set up an automated email that goes to them welcoming them and thanking them for subscribing. Now, what a lot of people do who do this is they just sort of send a generic email that says, welcome, thanks, you'll get the newsletter on Saturday or whatever. That is a massive missed opportunity. I'd actually say welcome emails are sort of the biggest missed opportunity from most people because they just don't think about them. The goal of your welcome email is to get a reply. And I'm going to explain that as we go in a bit. But you want to keep that in mind, that you're not just welcoming them and thanking them or asking them to do something for you. You want to create a reason for them to reply, right? And I'll show you how to do that in a second. What this does is the welcome email also, when you do that, creates an amazing opportunity to learn about your audience on an individual level. And collectively, if you're getting all of these replies, that can inform your content, your marketing, give you a better sense of who is subscribing to this and who you're attracting. And it can even create an immediate sales opportunity depending what you do and how you do it and what you ask them and what you get them to tell you. So this is my welcome email. You could very easily adapt it to your own thing. It is incredibly successful. So I know it might be a little small, so let me sort of take you through it. So on the left-hand side is the email people get. At the top of it, there's just a quote that I like and will grab people's attention. Then I say, thanks for subscribing to For the Interested. To make sure you get the newsletter and it doesn't land in your spam folder, you can add my email address to your contacts. My goal is to help you produce, promote, and profit from your creations. The more I know about what you create and the challenges you face, the better I'll be able to help. So if you reply to this email and tell me a bit about your work, a couple things will happen. Number one, I'll respond with a specific suggestion for you. Seriously, I always reply. Number two, I'll be able to spread the word about your creations to more people. I love to promote my readers' work whenever possible. By the way, moving forward, you'll get a 1-paragraph email from me on weekdays and a full newsletter on Sunday. Thanks for your interest. P.S. You also may want to check out This Is How I Do It, which is a paid product of mine, and the rest of my universe. So I get a lot of replies to this. I would say probably 35 to 40% of the people who subscribe actually reply to me. The reason is this is not about me asking them to do something. This is about me offering them something, right? My audience is creators and entrepreneurs. Chances are they love a specific suggestion about how I can, help or something they can do to improve their work or get whatever they want. And number two, everybody would love me to spread the word and promote their stuff to more people, right? So it's not surprising that this gets a lot of replies. And you can see on the top right-hand side, that's just like a screenshot of, by the way, the subject line I use for this is, what do you create and how can I help? The subject line is not welcome to For the Interested, right? Personal. I don't want them to think it's a generic welcome email. right? What do you create and how can I help is probably going to get people to open it, and it does. And so I get a lot of replies to this. And I want to give you a sample on the bottom right here. So this is a reply I just got a couple days ago. He said, "Thanks, Josh. I'm following you on Twitter, but your reply to Dylan is what got me to visit your profile and subscribe. I want you to know how you got me to click. So here's my story. I've been training social media strategy to companies and the public since 2009. So this is how I make my income. Number one, membership, blah, blah, blah. I offer $49 a month session, blah, blah, blah. Number two, I offer full-time freelance consultation to corporations. This is short term from 3 to 12 months, high ticket." And then he goes on with some more personal stuff that I'm not sharing. Now, my business, my products, my clients are helping people like this grow their audience and business. This guy just think about the value of what this guy just told me. Number one, completely unprovoked, other than his response to this automated welcome email, right? He just told me how he found me, which is helpful for me to know from a marketing standpoint, why he subscribed. He told me what he does. He told me what he charges. He told me what his products are. I have a sense of how much he makes. I have all of this completely unprovoked. And by the way, this is not unusual. People will give me people love to talk about themselves. They will give me their life story, right? And they will do the same for you if they get a welcome email offering to help them. So I see LaDonna here, right? And I know we've talked in some of the other sessions about your audience in a newsletter for affluent adventurers, right? So if you had a welcome email like this that was sort of, tell me about your best trip or what you like to do, or whatever, it's very easy to see how someone would reply, and they would go, "Oh, I absolutely love going to beaches, and we're real adventurers, and we've been to the Bahamas and we've been to Hawaii, but we really like going to obscure places. Any recommendations?" Right? Like, that is not far-fetched at all. And you're providing value, you're building relationships, and so this system, so not only is it effective, so a couple things happen. Number one, if you're going to do this, you need to reply when people reply. If you ignore them, that doesn't set a great template for your business. That said, you don't need to reply immediately. So I try to get back to everyone within a week or so, right? Do not feel the pressure of like, oh, you instantly have to reply or you're ignoring them, right? They get it. It's fine. When you reply, people will be blown away. Number one, lots of people reply to me just to say, like, "I've never seen a welcome email. Like, is this for real? Like, are you actually gonna?" I get a lot of that too. Like, "Are you actually gonna reply?" Like, they can't believe when someone replies. And that, in terms of brand and marketing, it's like it establishes your relationship with them right off the bat, and that impression goes forever, right? So when I reply to people, I'll usually send them, a suggestion, depending what it is or who it is, I might give them a custom suggestion of like, "Oh, you should do this." I might refer them to my content. Here's a few articles that'll help you with that. I'll typically plug a product or something as well, right? Here's a couple of free articles. So for this guy, I might go, "Oh, here's a couple articles you might find helpful about how to grow your business. And oh, by the way, if you're interested in some one-on-one help, I also do consulting," right? I have had these welcome emails directly lead to sales and clients, people who had no context of me whatsoever, found something, signed up for my newsletter, got this welcome email, replied with their situation. I replied with some suggestions, and then they hired me. So it's, again, I can't recommend this approach enough. Again, it depends what you're doing, but in general, I think it can be very helpful. The other way it's helpful, a quick word about deliverability, and this can get technical, and so I'm not going to go too far down that rabbit hole. But basically, when people reply to you, anytime someone replies to your email or mass email that you send, it sends a signal to Gmail and Outlook and all those things that you're not a spammer, right? The more people reply, the better sort of your ranking is, the more likely your emails are to avoid spam filters and promotions tabs, right? So even if people don't add you to their address books. So all of these replies to the welcome email, when someone replies, they're going to see my next email because they've essentially told Gmail, I'm not a spammer, right? The other thing is Gmail is looking at my account as a whole. So the more replies I get, the more favorably it's like, oh, well, 20% of people reply to this guy's email, so he's probably not a spammer, right? So that's the other thing. A welcome email getting a reply can help you also land in more people's inboxes and stay out of spam filters. So thank you page can also be optimized. Slightly less important in my mind than a welcome email, although it is still an opportunity. So thank you page is when someone subscribes on your sign up page or wherever they subscribe, you usually have the ability to redirect them to a thank you page, basically. That's, again, you're reaching people as opposed to just something that says, confirmed, thanks for signing up. You have the opportunity to talk to someone who trusts you enough that they just gave you their email address, like they're interested, right? So that page could be, an opportunity to promote something, right? Oh, thanks so much for subscribing to my newsletter. Here's some of my most popular posts that I think you might like. Or thanks so much for subscribing to my newsletter. Here, you can surprise and delight, right? Surprise, here's a 10% discount on our product. If you buy, oh, by the way, if you book a consulting call today, I'll give you a 25% discount, right? Like you can do whatever, but an opportunity to promote, an opportunity to reward, like I was just talking about. It's also an opportunity to measure your success. This is especially true if you're going to do Facebook ads and that kind of thing. They're going to measure conversions by people that hit that thank you page. So you're definitely going to want a page to redirect them to if you're tracking conversions and all that kind of stuff. And then it's also an opportunity to establish your brand voice. Again, it's such a missed opportunity. Someone has just given you their email address. They're sort of excited. They sort of trust you. And then to greet them with just a generic, like, standard, thank you for subscribing, check your email to see, it's just a missed opportunity. So, and that's true with all this stuff, not just related to newsletters, but everything is an opportunity to establish your brand and voice and personality with your audience. So this is a perfect example of that. This is the subscribe button on my sign up page. You'll see I ask for name and email. The button, instead of just saying submit or subscribe, I say I'm interested. So play on for the interested. But then the line below it, which would normally be some generic "we won't spam you" thing, I changed to "your information will never be shared because I'm not a jerk." That line, I have had multiple people tell me they subscribed solely because of that line. Because it says something about who I am and what my newsletter is and the sort of brand or personal voice. Every little detail can be twisted to your own. You don't have to go with the defaults. They're all opportunities, right? How few people do you ever see change the line that said whatever the generic line is about, your information won't be shared or whatever, right? And I share this not necessarily because you have to do that, but I think when you start to look at all of it, right, all these things, welcome emails, thank you pages, they're opportunities to convey whatever your brand voice is, right? Whether that's fun or encouraging or inspiring or whatever sort of emotions you want to convey, you have chances to convey them. You just have to look at, once you get in that mindset of everything's an opportunity to stand out, then it's much easier to sort of take advantage of those. You can also optimize your content, whatever content you're doing. So again, this first one, a start here page is not even, this would be on your website. It's not even just for a newsletter. I think it's a good idea on your website to have a start here page in the navigation, as opposed to letting people sort of, just assuming they'll find their way around. If you have a start here in your navigation, it'll get lots of clicks and it allows you to guide them to what you want them to go to and see and understand. It's also a great place to plug your newsletter, obviously, because the people that are clicking that are going to be people who are new to your world and probably are not on your newsletter. Blog posts, we talked about this a bit before. Obviously, you should plug your newsletter in your blog post. I recommend plugging it within the content of the blog post, not just with a form at the bottom or the sidebar. You also, when promoting it, want to make it relevant. So, for example, if I had a newsletter in which I shared social media tips and I had a blog post about how to grow on Twitter, when I referenced it, I wouldn't just say, oh, by the way, get my social media tips newsletter. I would say, oh, for more Twitter tips, get my newsletter, right? Or a blog post about Facebook would be for more Facebook tips, get my newsletter, right? So I'm matching the sign up prompt to the content that people are reading because I know it'll be 100% match. I'm not lying. I'm not going to say, oh, get my newsletter about Twitter if it's not about Twitter. But if my newsletter is about social media and some of it is Twitter tips, there's nothing wrong with positioning it as, if you want more Twitter tips, get this newsletter. By the way, like, again, I'll use LaDonna as an example again. It's the same thing as if you had a piece of content that was about beach vacations and your newsletter was about vacations generally, but some of them are beach vacations. I would plug it as, for more info on great beach vacations, check out my newsletter. Not for more info about vacations, check out my newsletter. Match what they want. If they're reading that article, you already know they're interested in beach vacations, so they're going to be more likely to subscribe. Pop-ups, a quick word about pop-ups. I'm sure you've seen them. I'm sure they annoy you and drive you crazy. First of all, they do work. You will get more subscribers. They also will annoy people. It's a personal preference. I don't think there's anything wrong with using them. I don't think there's anything wrong with not using them. Personally, I don't use them. But you will get signups, but you'll also get people that are annoyed. If you do decide to use pop-ups, there's lots of different ways to use them. They can pop up when people first hit the page. They can pop up when people are leaving the page. They can pop up only after people scroll down. They can pop up only after people have viewed multiple pages. Whatever you're using to power the pop-up, you can figure that out. But the big takeaway is, yes, they work. No, you don't have to use them. Don't feel bad either way. It's sort of up to you. And then videos, if you're doing videos similar to blog posts, you absolutely should reference your newsletter in every video with a very clear ask for people to subscribe. If you're a YouTuber, at the end of the video, you don't just want them to subscribe on YouTube, you want them to get the newsletter. And then also you obviously want to put links in the video descriptions on YouTube and that kind of thing. The big takeaway here, and by the way, it's also true of TikTok and Instagram and anything. The big takeaway here is that any content you're putting out there, you should be including references and driving people to the newsletter. They're all opportunities to grow your audience. Use a here's what you missed email. So this is a tactic that when people hear it, they think is going to annoy people. I thought it was going to annoy people. It doesn't. They love it. I get thanked all the time. And it's a guaranteed way to basically get at least 15% more opens for every issue you send. Basically, you send your newsletter and then you resend it to people who haven't opened it after a few days. When you resend it, change the subject line to here's what you missed or something like that. And add a line at the top of the newsletter explaining why people are getting it. Hey, looks like this might have got lost in your inbox. Just wanted to resend it to you. Don't resend it without acknowledging that you're resending it for a reason. So, for example, for me, my newsletter goes out on Sunday morning. I resend it Friday afternoon. The other thing I would suggest when you're doing the resend, pick a different time of day. So you'll notice for me, the main newsletter goes out on a weekend morning. The follow-up goes out on a weekday afternoon. Trying to hit different people. Oh, maybe they didn't open it because they're busy on Sunday morning, so Friday afternoon is better. This will work. Some people will unsubscribe, just like some people unsubscribe anytime you send anything. But most people that do unsubscribe, they weren't paying attention anyway. So you might as well have them off your list. Like I actually like this sort of runs some people off. Because if you're not opening it, you're not helping anything anyway. And that said, if anyone does reply, and email tracking is certainly not 100% and it's getting worse. So you will get some people who reply and say, oh, but I did open it, I do open it, or I'll get to it when I get to it, and don't send me these follow-ups. I will opt them out. So that's the other thing. Like, it's not that they have to get it. I just segment anyone who does complain about it to me, or say they don't want it, or say they did open it, I'll just opt them out so they won't get it moving forward. But it's a net positive, and you'll get a lot more opens for each issue. Ways to use newsletter for a marketing sales tool. Some of this is sort of obvious, but again, we've talked about how the newsletter can generate information for you. Don't be afraid to ask for replies. Give people a reason to reply to your newsletter. Keep in mind this can be market research. It's a great way to tap into your audience and hear from them. You can pay attention to what people click, like we talked about before. It tells you something about who those people are and what they're interested in. You can also segment those people. Somebody who, let's say I had a product about how to grow on Twitter. If somebody who, I could segment anyone who's clicked articles I've shared about Twitter and then email them to promote the Twitter course to them. And then also you can drive people to social posts to amplify them. This is something not enough people do. I think it's an easy missed opportunity that many people miss. People think about using social posts to promote their newsletter. They don't think about using their newsletter to promote their social posts, to basically cheat the algorithm. So let's say you post something on Instagram that you want more people to see, or you had a question there. I could, in my newsletter, go, oh, by the way, we're having an amazing conversation on Instagram about the best ways to grow your audience. Go check it out. Go check out what people are saying in the comments and join in here with a link. Now, what happens is, not only are you driving people to Instagram who, if they weren't following you, might now follow you, you're also spiking the algorithm, because Instagram's going, oh my God, all these people are now coming to this post. This must be good, right? So I actually think it's something, what most people do in their newsletters, they just go, oh, follow me on Instagram or follow me on Twitter. You're better off driving to specific content on Instagram that people will see. And when they see it, they're more likely to engage and follow you and all of that. So again, think about it as two ways. And just to wrap up, I know most of you are going to monetize in ways that aren't directly through your newsletter. But if at some point you have a decent sized audience or specific niche and you're interested in monetizing the newsletter itself, these are basically the 7 ways to do it. One is advertising or sponsors. So you could sell sponsorships in your own newsletter. This is one of the advantages of having it not being a brand newsletter, but a content-driven newsletter. If LaDonna's, and I don't know your company name, but if it was the LaDonna company newsletter, it's weird to sell a sponsorship. If it's Affluent Adventurers, cruise lines might line up to sponsor it. So again, that's an opportunity. Subscriptions and memberships, if you decide you want to have some content be paid, that's something you could certainly do. Product sales is obvious. You can sell products through the newsletter. Business opportunities, the newsletter can attract interesting partnerships or gives you another asset to play with. Content promotion and traffic. So what that means is, well, some people might pay you to, if you have a big enough audience, they might pay you to drive traffic to some of their own content. But even if you do something like, let's say, YouTube, where you monetize those views with ads on YouTube, having a big newsletter to be able to drive people to YouTube actually monetizes sort of on the back end through the YouTube ads. Consulting and services is an obvious one. And then donations, right? If your newsletter is good, you can allow people to, give donations to support it. You could also use the newsletter to get people to give donations to a cause that you care about. That can be interesting and helpful for your brand as well. So it's maybe the monetization isn't directly like give us money, but hey, if you've appreciated this free newsletter we give you over the year, please make a donation to this charity. We're collectively raising money for this charity that relates to your brand or whatever. Finally, there's a lot more ways I can help you. If you haven't already, fortheinterested.com/subscribe is my free newsletter. I think you will find it helpful if you found any of this helpful. I have a course specifically to help you grow your newsletter. It's called the Newsletter Accelerator, and you can get it at newslettercreators.com. This is how I do it, is a collection of resources where every week I basically share behind the scenes exactly how I do something to grow my audience or business. You can get that at joshspector.com/thisishow. If you want some consulting help, I do one-off calls, as well as custom strategy plans that are usually like about a 2-month engagement. You can get details about all of that at joshspector.com/consulting. I have a free Facebook group, which is amazing and has like over 4,000 newsletter creators from all over the world sharing tips and stuff. And that's at facebook.com/group/newsletter creators. And I'm super active on Twitter at jspector. And if you do all those things, you're probably going to be really sick of me. Any questions about anything we talked about today up to this point? Anyone want me to review their sign up page? What do you got?
I feel like I want to have a sign up page now because I'd love to know what you think. And I'm going to subscribe to your newsletter because now I just want to talk more to you.
Yeah, I was going to say, if you subscribe, you will get that week welcome email. So,
Oh, so Sabrina's asking a question. She says, I understand that you're working more B2C. Any best practice for B2B newsletter?
I would say it's all basically the same. Other than obviously you're tailoring your messaging. The tactics I think are all basically the same. It's just that you're tailoring your messaging to who you're speaking to. For example, I don't know if you want to tell me what your niche or industry is. I can sort of give you an example.
All right, Sabrina can unmute herself now.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah. Hey, Sabrina.
Right. Hi. So I'm a consultant, marketing consultant for businesses in the financial industry, manufacturing industry, health and safety. We have clients who are also working with medical supply and stuff like that. So it's very particular, and I don't think those people are going to reply to your email at all. So it's kind of.
I think they would. What do they? I don't know if you happen to see. I think it was the second session where we talk. Well, it's the end of the first session, started the second session where we talk about like how to figure out a topic. But what with your audience, what is it that forget newsletter for a second? What is it that they want? What do they value? What are they trying to figure out?
But the issue is that most of the time, the people who receive those emails, they are not business owner like I am or like you are. They are employees. So most of them, they don't give a monkeys about those stuff. They are ready to.
But they have a job. What do they have to do? What are they trying to do?
Well, usually the people I'm working with, they are targeting the buyers. So they need to understand the product as their best and how they're going to help their company at some point and get the best pricing. That's most
okay, perfect. So and this won't be exact, obviously, because I don't know all the nuances, but let's go with that, right? So if you decided that your target audience is employees who are trying to figure out how to get better prices for whatever they're doing, right? If you created a newsletter that's specifically sharing tips about how to get better prices, they're all going to care. And if your welcome email says, thanks for subscribing to the, better pricing newsletter or whatever, we share tips to help you figure out how to get better prices. Tell me a little about, what you're struggling with or any challenges you have, and I'll give you some suggestions. I think they would, not all of them, but some of them would absolutely reply and would say, oh, hey, we're buying this thing and I feel like we're paying too much. How do I figure out if we are paying too much, or how do I negotiate a better price or whatever? So I think they absolutely, I hope that makes sense, but I think the same thing would work. You just have to position it to what your audience wants.
Okay, cool.
That
Thank you
sense?
so much. Yeah, that makes sense. I'm building those content planning for those clients, and it's not easy every day. So thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else have any questions or anything they want to share? Oh, LaDonna has a question. Says the one paragraph email you send during the week, is it sent daily, and is it an extension of your newsletter, or is more email marketing to your subscribers?
Yes. So let me give you the quick backstory of how that came to be. So for about 5 years, my Fourth Interested newsletter was just one email a week. It was that Sunday email. It included like five are curated. Originally it was 10. I cut it back to like 5 curated articles. That's what it was. Then all the time I was talking to people, clients and other people, and I would always say, look, a newsletter doesn't have to be long. Like a newsletter could be a sentence, and I bet it would work really well as long as it was valuable. People, whatever. So as a complete experiment, I started a separate newsletter that I called the Daily Graph, and that was every weekday. It was a one paragraph email newsletter, right? People loved it. And the way I launched it was I just promoted it. I said, hey, to my newsletter, I'm like, hey, I'm starting this other thing. It's a daily. If you want it, great, right? So a couple thousand people wound up subscribing to it, and the feedback was great. And I liked writing it, and it wasn't hard because it was so short and I could schedule it far in advance. But then I got to a point where I was like, well, the audiences for this are kind of the same. I'm promoting these two different newsletters. So now some people are subscribing to the daily that aren't getting the Sunday. Some people are subscribing to the Sunday that aren't getting the daily. Some people who are getting the Sunday haven't checked it out just because they're too lazy to sign up, even though I know they would like it. Like, what am I doing? So I collapsed them and basically changed for the interested to be the Sunday email that it always was, and then these one paragraph daily editions. They're not email marketing. There's no overlap. The Sunday is not a summary of the daily. I do allow people to opt out of the daily. So some people still just get the Sunday one. But for simplicity of all of it, I just sort of collapsed it. It's not exactly how I started, but I realized it doesn't make sense to sort of have these two competing things. So the people that opt out of the daily, they don't ever see that stuff because the Sunday is totally different. And again, for me, this goes back to some of the here's what I knew that doing that would cost me some subscribers, but I cared more. I knew the ones that stayed and that got that daily would be even closer to me, would be even a stronger connection. So it's one of the reasons why my newsletter now, even though that 25,000 number is out there, I'm really more at like 18,000 subscribers than 25 because I've cleaned the list and I've, and whatever, but the open rates are higher. Like I care at the end of the day how many people are reading this and clicking. So that's what it is. It's a little confusing. It's also why on the sign up page, I don't even say it's a daily, it's a weekly. It's why in the welcome email, I go, here's what you're going to get. But yes, so not necessarily how I would recommend it, but that's how it got there.
That's a great question, LaDonna.
Yeah.
So we have like 1 minute left. I don't know if, oh, good. Michael's got a question. Do you use RSS feeds, Pocket, or other tools to find and aggregate information for possible inclusion in your newsletter as a link to an article or to use as the basis for your own article?
I do not. They certainly can be very helpful. I wouldn't say not to use them. Personally, the biggest source of stuff that I find, aside from stuff that I create, is subscribing to other newsletters and following people on Twitter. I subscribe to a lot of newsletters. And when I subscribe to them, I subscribe with a sort of alternate email address. So instead of josh@joshspector.com, it's josh plus newsletter at joshspector.com. And I filter those directly to a newsletter folder. So that essentially, it's not an RSS feed, but essentially I have a separate folder that is just my newsletter subscriptions, and I can go through them. The thing with RSS, and again, RSS is, I'm not saying not to use it. Everyone sort of has their own system. But for me, I like newsletters because there's a layer of curation before I even get to it versus, oh, this person might have a good blog and I subscribe and then my RSS feed's giving me everything they've done. I'd rather just subscribe to other curators who are surfacing the best. And it's the same thing with Twitter, right? I don't follow publications on Twitter. I follow individual creator, thought leader, curator types. But it can work, Pocket, RSS feeds, all those things are good. It's really just personal preference.
Got it. Thanks for the question, Michael.
Yep.
So I think we're at the end of our time. So I want to thank you so much, Josh, for this session and the last 3 sessions. It's been great. It's been really great. I've learned so much. I'm sure everyone else has as well. The recording of this session and the other sessions are available in Lab within 24 hours. So the first 3 sessions are there. If you want to save anything in the chat, save it now because you won't find that in the Lab. I invite you to go to the DM Engage group and talk about this and tell everyone how great Josh is and tell them to go and fill out his newsletter thing so he can get a little bit of back from them. But that is the last for this workshop sprint. It's been great. Thank you all for joining us, and we hope to see you in January for the next one.
Thank you guys. I really appreciate it. And
Happy
feel free to
holidays.
contact me if you have any questions about anything.